Classes in session.
Hey everybody, welcome to Unlearn 16 Classes in Session, and I am wicked lucky to have back Dr. Z. Dr. Z, how you doing, honey?
Amazing. As soon as you message me, JJ, I come running.
Listen,
Anytime.
and I caught you before you take a small trip to where? Zambia?
Zambia and Botswana with 18 undergrads, part of the Gonzaga Study Abroad program.
Honey, where was my invite? I'll go check my mail. Is it in there?
One of the many amazing things that Gonzaga does is has a very important study abroad part of their program for the undergrads. You can go to Venice for a semester, you can go to Europe for a semester, but they have several small study abroads, and one is called Gonzaga in Zambezi. Zambezi is a city in Zambia, and we're going for 5 weeks, May 18th to June 21st, and the 18 students have been divided into 4 groups. I have a group of students, and we're going to be teaching computers in the morning at several Zambian schools, and then a community computer class in the afternoon.
Wow.
Another group is doing some leadership studies. Another group is working at developing a sort of a YMCA soccer program. And another group's kind of doing, how do you get grants and stuff to improve? So I was beyond honored to be asked. I'm also selfishly going to be doing a big study while I'm there on Zambian teachers' use of social emotional learning strategies.
Wow. What an easy tie-in to what we're going to talk about today. Yes.
Well, what I think is going to be fascinating is we know social emotional learning has been around in America for years. CASEL, CASEL, of course, developed the ideas, and then thousands of programs exist today. But what are the childhood traumas that African children have experienced? And do different social emotional programs support those traumas?
Right.
There's certainly some laws in Zambia that aren't as protective of children. There's some child bride situations.
Absolutely.
And I'm really going to be proud to do some in-depth discussions, some comparative work, and then publish it in a journal, saying what we can learn from them.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I'm really excited. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of work, but I think I'm 3.5 weeks out. I just got 8 vaccinations.
That's right.
On Thursday.
You get hepatitis, you get yellow fever,
meningitis. Plus they gave me another booster, shingles, a pneumonia. Oh my goodness, rabies, because dogs there are what they are. So Friday, I felt like I had every disease under the sun, but I'm 100%
I'm pretty sure you're Captain America right now. I think that's the level you're at. Look, Dr. Z, and she's been on my podcast prior. She's amazing on TikTok. She's an amazing educator, originally from Canada, now shifted to the United States and doing all this amazing work. And I'm gonna give you all her stuff in my bio, and you can go check her out on all her platforms. But what we really want to talk about today, because I'm at my wit's end. I don't even know what to do anymore. I wake up in a rage about what's going on in the educational system, particularly in the United States. I don't think that Canada's immune, because I feel like it all bleeds over here. It like spills all over our borders and then seeps in everywhere else. I think we got to look at what's going on in Florida, what's going on in Texas, and then how it's spilling out seemingly to, I don't know how many major states when it comes to things like the Don't Say Gay bill, CRT, and what they are using CRT as a catalyst for, and why the heck all of this is coming out now. I have my theories. I know you have yours. But I mean, where do you want to start? You want to start with DeSantis? You want to start in Florida?
The number one thing I want to start with is I'm really happy you're in Canada. and if you are in Canada, and if you are a Canadian educator or a Canadian parent, I want you to know from me that Canada's educational system, with its bruises, is exceptional.
Yeah, it is.
So let's just do one small comparative thing, and I talk about this a lot. In Ontario, we have the Ontario Education Ministry, who has published the curriculum for every grade and every subject. It's a publicly accessible document. It's upgraded every 5 years or so. It has everything in the document for a teacher and a parent and a student, the big ideas, the exemplars, the expectations. As a teacher, you download it and you map out your 195 days.
Yeah.
If you're a parent and your kid's sitting in a grade 5 classroom in Sudbury, Ontario, and you move to Toronto, you're getting the exact same program. Mm-hmm. And if you're a parent in Ontario and you move to Alberta, pretty similar program, because all of our provinces have these province-wide curriculums.
I'm worried about Alberta a little bit. That's where it's spilling out, seemingly. It's spilling out into Alberta, and he's altering it. But nonetheless, I absolutely get what you're saying.
It's this idea of common. In America, people will say, we have the Common Core, which was a program established many years ago to have a common math and language curriculum. Yeah. Great idea. Mm-hmm. Just equity, fairness, saving of time, the understanding of age-appropriate capacity. The problem is not everybody adapted it. It was a choice. Yeah. So some states have it and some states don't. Well, therefore, then the word common isn't going to work. If I move, my kid is going to have a completely different program.
And just so everybody understands, the reason why is because the federal government in the United States has a lot less power than individual state governments. So individual state governments are constantly asserting that they know what's best for their people, what's best for their state. It's as old as the origins of the United States in and of itself, trying to avoid a kingship and all of that kind of crap. So here we're sitting with this Common Core as it applies to math. And
language.
But the math is what I think a lot of people are having a problem with. So continue on with the Common Core. Yeah.
So like you said, every state has this sort of Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. They oversee everything. They oversee hiring, certificates, the professional development provided to teachers. What a great idea. Mm-hmm. The problem is the money that's wasted on with 50 different offices. Everyone who thinks they're unique, nobody is aligning with each other and taking best practices. Me and best practices. Why are we reinventing the wheel? Right. It goes back to this idea of understanding what a 7-year-old is and what they're capable of. Right. I don't believe that a 7-year-old in Utah is any different than a 7-year-old in Florida or a 7-year-old in Texas. Mm-hmm. Sure, there's some family values and cultural differences, but their learning capabilities are the same. Right. So therefore, what they're provided should be similar. What's expected of them should be similar. Mm-hmm. And there's way too many people, way too many ideas, way too much money being spent on trying to individualize each state's learning platform. Right. And you see money being thrown away.
Well, here's the big problem. I mean, we can talk about Common Core when it comes to math, because I know a lot of parents and a lot of teachers really, really hate it. And I've tried my best to understand it. And let's just sum it up. It is allowing kids to understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because heaven help me, I've tried to understand it. It is trying to figure out how younger kids should understand numeracy and mathematical concepts outside of just simply memorizing equations and things like that. They use all these different methodologies to make them understand numbers and what the equations mean and why we've created them and how you can get there. And there's multitudes of ways to get to the answer, which leads me to believe the reason why most people stand against it, just like me, because they don't understand it. Because the parents didn't do math that way. So their kid brings home homework. They're like, I don't know what to do. And I would also probably argue a lot of teachers don't understand a lot of those core principles. I've been advocating forever in Ontario that we should have math specialist teachers teaching elementary math from the hop. I should not be teaching kids math. Just because I can add 3 and 7 doesn't mean that I understand those foundational components of math. So by the time they get to grade 10, it doesn't all fall apart. And nobody, especially in the States, is putting nearly enough money into, if so-and-so is having a problem with these concepts, they take their math book home. Their mom and dad look at it and go, that's garbage. They call their state representative and say, this is crap, get rid of it, rather than having somebody at the school who is paid, teachers staying later, tutors staying later, so that kids can truly understand these essential concepts.
That is 100% correct. Plus,
Plus.
they're buying a textbook that they're trying to teach these concepts from. So an absorbent amount of money is being spent. Absolutely. And we all know textbooks, they're published 3 years after they've been written, so they're already out of style. Half the kids sitting in a classroom don't have the capacity to understand, let alone read and do some of the questions in the math. So then they're looked upon poorly.
Yeah.
They're too visual, or they're not visual enough, depending on the kind of learner that's in front of them. They rely so heavily on the resource as opposed to the method.
Because I don't think they understand the method.
Yeah.
A lot of teachers.
I'm with you. I taught grade 7 math to about 3 different cohorts of kids. And I did a huge disservice to those children.
Yeah, I would be a mess. It would be memorize the times tables, kids. It's because it's how I learned. Right? But I didn't learn the foundational. I don't understand. You know, the kids that can do Rubik's Cubes and that have that amazing spatial intelligence, right? Those are math kids. They have an instinct for it. I never had that. I learned how to do a quadratic equation, then I just applied it from here to here to here to here. I still, to this day, don't understand why we do it, but I can get to the right answer, and I can do it the way they taught me to do it. That doesn't make me, fundamentally understanding math. Yeah. So a lot of states I hear, and we're going to get to Florida, are trying to get rid of Common Core now. Yes, they're like, we're done with it. It's garbage.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. And that's great. But what are we going to do instead? I'm all about reinventing. I'm all about tweaking. But you can't throw it out unless there's something in its place.
Well, you know what
we have children sitting in the seats looking for something.
Absolutely.
The other part that they're not doing is this is so important to me personally, is this idea of collaborative subjects. Math is a great subject, and it can be taught alone. But when you put it with science and geography and show the application of the calculation of something, it's so much richer. A student sits there and goes, oh, this is why I need to know it. A student sits there and goes, oh, I want to go into this line of work. Therefore, I'll be able to do it because I understand this way of processing something. Yeah. We've made it too standalone.
Yeah.
And whenever you do that with any subject, it then becomes a black and white situation. I like it or I don't like it. Absolutely. As opposed to, I understand it, I need it.
Yeah.
And I'm just all about how, like, my favorite thing was I did a huge unit every year on the Titanic. And it was a math, science, geography, and language unit.
But how that thing
learned about flotation. They learned about writing letters. They learned about, and they got so much out of it because they were able to understand what a boat is and how a boat floats and how a boat's propelled and where it was in the world when it went down and how they brought it back up and what it means to, what's a last letter to a family member. You have to incorporate things to make, me and my idea of being a scholar practitioner, right? I want everything rooted in theory and 100%. Rooted in prior knowledge, but that it's practical to who you are and relevant today.
I want to know, and we're going to get specifically to Ron DeSantis, but I want to know, because it's not just Ron DeSantis, it is state after state after state. It seems that they're falling like freaking dominoes. I want to know who is arguing against that kind of logic. But I think what's happening is that kind of logic is never brought up. I think what they're saying are things like, listen, you as parents don't get what your kids are doing. We think it's garbage. We want to return to the way you were raised because, and it's all this bull crap, your childhood was so much better than it is today. We want to return to how you were raised and how you memorized timetables and how you did it. Why? Because you understood math. Probably didn't, but we want to return to that because that's when, for heaven help me, America was great, right? Like it's that kind of line that they're trying to have, and people want to buy into that because you don't want to feel like an ass as a parent. I don't want to be a parent in anywhere, and my kid brings home work, and I have to go, I don't want to understand that. Now I feel like an idiot, and I look like an idiot in front of my kid. This isn't good. This isn't good for me. So rather than me go, wow, you guys have advanced so much that you need to teach me, that I need to do some learning. Parents, look, and a lot of parents don't have time. In all fairness, it's not like I think all parents can relearn math, but we're so painfully limited by our own egos, even when it comes to our kids, that will listen to guys like Ron DeSantis who say, we should get rid of it. That's garbage. We should get rid of it. But my bigger problem with Ron, so many problems.
I just don't like it. And I feel for parents because, like you said, you feel like an idiot. But first of all, I don't believe in homework, right? I don't want a parent having to teach their kid at home.
Side of the fence. But I'm a high school teacher, not an elementary school teacher.
Yeah. I want work done at home, but I don't want it to be an argument, difficult, upsetting to a family, taking away from family time. I want work at home, but I'm not going to mark it. I want them to do things and then bring it and apply it at home. But that's different. But this idea of parents are afraid to look dumb in front of their children. 100%. So they're bringing home division, and a parent says, this is how you do division. And the child says, no, that's not how I was taught. And a fight breaks out. Yeah. I do not wish that in any home around the world anywhere. I want it to be, this is how I was taught, Mom. This is how I was taught, child. That's cool. It's kind of the same. It's a little short, a little faster, but we still get to the same answer. Awesome. Yeah. Everything is a fight. Yeah. Because again, everything is black and white, right or wrong, up and down, yes and no, good and bad. Where is the gray?
It's all gray.
Where is for this particular family, for this particular school, for this particular subject, for this particular community, this is what works.
Yeah.
And I'm not about big blanket things. Yeah. I go back to, what do we know about child development? What do we know about the capabilities of people? How are we preparing teachers?
And there's another.
In Canada, we make generalists. In elementary, in K-8 in Canada, you teach all 11 subjects. That's just expected of you. And in America,
I don't agree with.
Yeah, in elementary, it's tough.
Yeah, I mean, and I've said this before, I think there can be subject areas, just like I'm a high school teacher, I can teach geography, I can teach society, I can teach politics, but let's not put me in a bio room. Let's not put me somewhere where I don't have the expertise. It's not that I can't read the textbook. Everybody thinks that a teacher's job is to read the textbook and regurgitate it. It's not. The real job of a teacher, the hardest job of a teacher, is to read the textbook, assign it to the curriculum, and then explain it. And when the kid doesn't get it, and 10 of them don't, you have to figure out 10 ways to explain it. And the only way you can do that as a teacher, a good teacher, a competent teacher, is by having proficiencies and expertise in a narrower field of vision, right? Is in a narrow, and that costs money, Dr. Z. That's the bottom, right? It costs money. The reason why kids are coming home with that homework is because they don't want to stay at school. Why don't they want to stay at school? Because they don't have the resources for them after 3:30. Everybody's gone out the door. We'll start pouring resources into that. And then they don't need to come home and do homework because they have them there. They have experts there. And their parents can be an expert at being parents. Over COVID, and I know you want to talk about this a lot, I had a lot of parents say, Joanna, what do you think about homeschooling? I said, look, I have a friend that homeschooled 6 of her kids. God bless. If you have the ability, A, you have the education, B, you have just like I just explained, I would argue I do not have the competence. I don't think I have the competence to teach my kids from grade 1 all the way. I don't think I do. But if you think you do, amazing. I'm not saying you can't. But for you to separate parent and family time from this is my teacher hat time, and you can do that, and you can have a healthy, amazing household where your kids learn.
Great.
God bless. Put it in a document, put it online. We should blow it up so everybody can follow it. I don't necessarily think it's as plausible. I think you can get them to read a book. I think you can get them to do the math equations and read the answer at the back of the book, but I don't know how much, if your kid's not getting it, I don't know how many different ways you can get at that, right?
If you've got the time and the patience and the space and the resources, and that's what you need as a family, because of your family situation, my answer is always awesome.
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. Because there are laws associated with homeschooling and
Yeah,
packages, and schools can sign off on it. It is an option for people. And
yeah,
I'm all about options.
yeah.
Whatever option works for you. But like you said, it's not easy. And
I
school isn't just about learning subjects.
absolutely.
There is a huge component of social emotionalness, social skills, opportunities for sports and travel, and
Can we talk
and
about that for a
yeah,
second? Your
yeah,
social emotional learning, because we're going to come back to Ron and his bill, the whole whatever, and his textbook bans. But when I dug into it, it's really about getting rid of Common Core and I
yep,
couldn't believe this, SEL, social and emotional learning. He wants to get rid of it. On
yes.
God, why in anywhere? I read that and went, what would be a driving purpose, even a freaking political one for that?
Well, because people who haven't worked in schools or don't work in schools or haven't been educators are making these decisions.
Right.
And if you haven't sat in a classroom in the last, I'm going to say 3 years, to see that students are coming to school not prepared to learn
Hmm.
because of whatever trauma is happening in their lives, you would say we should be doing more social emotional learning. I can't
Oh,
even tell you, as a principal, when students were sent to me for behavior in the classroom, 99% of the time it was because they weren't available for learning, and they
absolutely.
weren't available emotionally.
Hmm.
It's because of, and I want me to start the list. Obviously, horrific things happening in their lives, but
Yeah.
things like tired because they're a traveling sports kid, haven't eaten because of a situation in their family, divorce that's caused some situations, the feeling of abandonment, mental health, anxiety. They're not available for learning.
Hmm.
So anyone who says, let's get rid of that, let's get rid of caring for kids' emotional health and just focus on drill and kill, you don't know what you're talking
You
about. And
think?
I would
Okay.
say you put 500 teachers in front of you today, 498 would say, I can't teach 90% of the time because my students are not available.
Absolutely.
And
Would you say?
long before COVID,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
divorce was still around before COVID.
Absolutely.
Child abuse, horrific things happening to children,
Mhm.
exhaustion, hunger, poverty, all that was still happening long before COVID. COVID just exacerbated it,
What would
and
you say to
it
people that
put
said
us
it
into
was better?
it put us into their homes to know more.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a sight line, right? What would you say to people? Because this is what a lot of politicians are saying and whatever. Well, it was better when I was a kid. Because when I was a kid, kids didn't have anxiety. Sure, stuff went on at home, but you know what? We all survived it. Do you have any idea what my mom used to do to me? Do you know what my dad used to do to me when I was a kid? I survived it. And look, I'm making 6, 7 figures today. I'm doing just fine. We should stop coddle. I'm playing devil's advocate. Anybody listening right now? But these are the real arguments. Stop coddling these kids, because the more we coddle these kids, the more broken and pathetic our society becomes, and that's why they're not accomplishing things.
Yeah.
How do you? Because I'm
I
sure
think that
that's the argument, right?
so social emotional learning is not coddling. That's not. I think coddling is the participation ribbon and trophies. Right. I don't want anybody crying after the game because they didn't get something.
Yeah, I
Social
don't do that.
emotional learning is truly helping kids adapt
Yeah,
to situations, regulate their emotions.
yeah.
And I'm going to say, sure, it was different when I grew up, but
Hmm.
there also wasn't crappy food that's ruined our hormonal balance. There wasn't as much divorce, which has ruined children's self esteem. There wasn't as much drug abuse that has torn families apart. There wasn't as much diversity and diverse communities coming with different styles of living and being. It's just different.
Hmm.
It wasn't better. It wasn't worse. It was
And I
just
also,
different.
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
It just was different. And we have to adapt.
I had a yeah, I had a when I first started practice teaching. I was in a classroom with an older gentleman who had been near the end of his career, right? So, however old he was, and I remember saying to him, because a lot of people, you know that the line, kids aren't the way they used to be nowadays. Kids nowadays, they're crappier, they're less respectful, whatever, right? And I said to him, "You've been teaching." He was teaching for 35 years, and that was in like 2002, so he was teaching in from the 70s all the way, right? And I said, do you think kids are different now. Do you think the whole kids are right? And he goes, no. He goes,
They're
you want to
not.
know what the difference is? I'll tell you what the difference is. In 1975 or 1985, even in 1990, if a kid wasn't respectful, if a kid didn't want to be there, if a kid wasn't pulling his own weight, if a kid, and heaven knows why, if a kid just couldn't get it, you know what we did? We showed them the door. So here's what happened. The classroom was incredibly well managed because we eliminated all of the kids that had all of the things you've just described, and they went and got jobs at McDonald's or on a factory line or doing whatever, and none of which exists. You can't live like that anymore. It's not even an option. And then we made kids. We created all these laws and we created all these stipulations about kids staying there to graduate high school, come hell or high water. And now we're like, oh, well, classroom management. It's not because of a different kid. We just forced them to stay in the room. And I thought, how amazing. Like, think about that. He was an old white dude who had a very cool perception and a very aware perception rather than saying, yeah, they're jerks today, but a very aware perception of how things really have panned out, over the last 30, 40 years.
But let's go back to 1975. How many families were two-parent families?
Yeah. Well, you weren't allowed to divorce.
I'm just going to say most.
But
how many of those?
We can talk about how much abuse might have been in those families too, right? So like the level. So divorce was less, but I'm going to guess abuse was higher and less talk and more accepted.
And different kinds of abuse, right?
Yeah. You'd accept it a lot more, right?
How many of those families in 1975 were a one-income family with one of the parents at home?
Yeah.
How many of those families were a one-car family?
Mm-hmm.
How many of those families took a summer vacation as a family together with other family?
Mm-hmm.
How many of those families had multiple children? It really comes down to the nuclear family is not the same today as it was in 75. Yeah. I remember my mom went back to work when I was in grade 6, not heard of.
Yeah.
Got a car. We were 2 cars, 2 incomes, a mom who worked. But that came with, she wasn't at my games.
Mm-hmm.
It was hard for parent-teacher night, which we see for families today. Mm-hmm. Because people have to work because the world is expensive or we're on our own. We have to have transportation because not too many people before COVID were working in their homes.
Right.
People were supporting elderly parents, multiple children, potentially multiple spouses. Like, it is about the nuclear family and the breakdown of what we used to have. And so all these policymakers and bill makers want us to go back to that. We can't, because people can't afford to go back to one income, one car, one small, lovely home that you live in kind of life. It's not possible.
Right. I think it's also...
And technology. In a classroom today, somebody's being a jerk and you kick them out. And they go in the hall and they pick up their phone and they text their mom and they say, Mom, I just got kicked out of home ec for doing nothing. Lie.
Yeah.
And next thing, I'm sitting in my office and a mom's at my door going, why was so-and-so kicked out of class? I'm like, I don't know. And he's hiding in the bathroom. He's told his mom a lie. Mom believes. Mom yells at me. We know no details. And the next thing you know, we don't have a really healthy relationship between community member, family member, stakeholder, student, and school.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't happen. When I got in trouble at school, guess what happened with that information? It was kept a secret. I wasn't going home and telling my mom I got kicked out of class.
I wasn't making up an excuse because nobody was going to know.
So it is about the family. And that's what bothers me about the removing of books, the removing of resources, the removing of anything. Who's to say that book won't contribute in some way? And I'm critical thinking and problem solving, which is what I want. I don't care how old you are or what subject and what grade. That's 100%. What you should be learning.
And we can always learn it forever till the day we die.
How did we get to the moon? We solved a problem. How are we developing unbelievable cancer things? Critical thinking. Like that's the way we need to move forward. And until people realize that memorization doesn't solve problems, it doesn't cure cancer, we're not going to get too far forward with a really richer math curriculum.
Which is so frustrating. It is so frustrating. And to me, it always comes down to money and application. So if I can test a kid and give them a Scantron card and get them to fill out an SAT and they get a high mark and they can memorize and they can do this and they can do that and then they go to this school and then that school and then they get a job. I'm like, well, see, this kid. If a kid comes out of that learning how to critically think, it's not because of the curriculum, for the love of God, it's in spite of. And could you imagine for a minute, had we built a curriculum to challenge that critical thinker, what they could have accomplished? You know what I mean? You think about guys like Einstein who dropped out, or you think about all these amazing, who didn't even stay in school. Why didn't they stay in school? Because they were way more advanced in their processing and thinking and awareness than the teachers that were in front of them. I've had kids, listen, I've had a handful of kids over the last 20 years where I'm like, shoot, this kid's smarter than
I've had numerous. I love it. I love it.
And I say to them, listen, I'm going to challenge you to the best of my ability. And I'm going to, and I say to the kids too, when they hand things in, if you're giving me a paper that deserves 100% in grade 10, I'm marking it by my grade 11 standards. They're like, why? I'm like, because to hell with you resting in grade 10. Why wouldn't I push you? Why wouldn't you get as good as you possibly can get? As good as I can possibly push you to be. But again, it's about ease at which we can implement curriculum and the ease at which we can give a numerical value to your intelligence. And I use that word loosely because you can't, in order to create a hierarchy so you can go off to university and then you can go do whatever it is you're going to do. And every time somebody talks like that, every time I think this is what's making us less intelligent.
Well, people want, you know me about fear and jealousy. So people want normal, they want safe. And you did an awesome TikTok the other day when somebody was criticizing your hair and you're like, buddy, you're saying that because I scare you.
Yeah,
because
sure.
I'm what represents change, different. Mm-hmm. That scares you. That kid that you taught, that you gave the stuff to and took the SAT and went on to college, that's awesome. But what about everybody else?
Yeah.
And I've been using this analogy, is that students and learning and education is a river, right? It's a fast moving river, and every kid's a stick. And we throw all these sticks in the river, and some of them, lucky enough, get to the middle and they get bombing down the middle of the river and they make it from one end to the other. But what about all the other ones? The ones that get hung up on a rock, the ones that get stuck on the shore, the ones that get pushed down. Do we just ignore those students? Do we just ignore those kids? No, because that's 75% of the kids. Because
the answer is obviously yes, unfortunately. We have been. And the way that the United States is going, we're pushing that. We're not just doing that. We're encouraging it. We're glorifying it even.
Oh, don't be a different shaped stick or a different colored stick or a different weighted stick, because God forbid we're going to judge you. We're going to assume you're not going to make it to the middle. Right. That's the worst part.
Yeah.
So it's about fear. It's about family values. It's about a different nuclear family. It's about money. It's about not understanding capacity. It's about people not in education making decisions and rules. It's about not embracing change. It's about fear. This is why you and I can't fix it, because it's about everything. And until you get everybody in the room, and I'm talking kids and families and parents and lawmakers, you're not going to make good. I'm not saying the right decision. You're not going to make good decisions.
Yeah, I don't think there's any right or wrong. I think there's only there's only better and worse. Like what can we do? Because there's always better. There's always, the older I have gotten as a teacher and the more classrooms you sit in front of, and this it should be the way, the more aware you become at sort of that big picture. And all of the things, when I get a kid to sit down and memorize stuff and write a history test, and my kid looks at me, and I know there's kids that are going to get 97. I know there's kids are going to get 52. And I know there's some kids that studied really hard for that 97 and some kids that studied really hard for that 52. And there's a whole bunch of other kids, right? Kids that looked at it 10 minutes before the class. What I do know is that method of tests does very, very little to adequately judge or quantify that kid's potential or that kid's knowledge, or even better, how that kid's going to do in the future. And the older I've gotten, the more that I realize, and this is what happens in university for anybody who's gone to social sciences, they chuck tests. Why? Because it was easy. When we had a whole bunch of kids, we gave them a Scantron, we weeded them out, we got the handful of kids that made it through that process. And then they started really testing us. And how do they really test us? Well, we write papers, and then we stand in a room of our peers and we defend every single quote. We defend and apply every single idea. Now that's learning. But nobody has time for that in high school. We say we don't.
Yeah. Oh, you and I could do an entire series on assessment and evaluation. That's my other baby. Authentic assessment and evaluation means that someone is able to demonstrate knowledge, and not everybody can demonstrate it the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And just put 12 adults in the room and say, tell me your childhood phone number. Some people will memorize it. Some people will go like this. Some people will look it up. Right. You have knowledge and you have a way to get it and then share it. But I'm not going to judge you on that. Did you get me the answer? Yeah, awesome. I'm going to embrace the way you figured it out.
Yeah.
My favorite thing I ever saw, I had an amazing teaching partner named Michelle Cordy for many years at an elementary school. We shared a classroom. I sort of taught the morning. She taught the afternoon. She did the math and science. And she did two things as a math teacher, which blew me away. She used to do Fermi puzzles, Fermi problems. And Fermi, Fermi, was like a famous math scientist or something like that, where she would ask kids, how much spaghetti does a family of 4 eat in a year? And the kids are like, I don't know. Or how many steps does it take to walk from here to the moon? I don't know. It was these impossible problems. She would teach them how to break that down into small, minute things to eventually lead to an answer.
Amazing.
I saw children's brain grow in front of me. I literally saw it. I saw them immediately go, that's impossible. And then over the course of a couple of weeks, as they each chose their projects, these impossible equations, I saw them be able to take something impossible and be able to think about it in a way that made it so they could actually come up with a response. And I'm like, that kid doesn't even know 8 times 8, but man, can they think about how to problem solve.
Well, and there it is. Right? There it is.
They don't need to know 8 by 8. They don't need to know 8 times 8. Stick it in your damn phone. The other thing that made me really proud is she did a huge thing with Barbies. She gave every kid a Barbie, and she wanted them to be able to launch the Barbie across the room.
It's amazing. On Monday.
Didn't give them anything to launch. And by the end of the week, these students had invented these launching fulcrum thing. And so she's teaching them as they're talking through problems. So to get the Barbie to launch. And on Friday, we celebrated the Barbies launching and who launched the first. Kids who hated school, hated the world, hated themselves, hated math, hated science, hated us, were there every day, smiling, engaging with their classmates, writing things down, being heard. It doesn't take much to engage a student. But you put a textbook and say, okay, everybody turn to page 80 and start the questions. You're done. You're done. You give a novel, the same novel to everybody in the class, and say, oh, let's all read it. But when you have educate, and I can think of another one, a guy named Dennis Woods, who was just incredible. He was a grade 6 guy. That was my associate teacher when I first started. He also was the first person to ever teach me to never say guys. 1991, I'm trying to get all the kids on board. And I'm like, okay, guys. And he pulls me aside and goes, don't say guys. I'm like, 1991, he knew that was sexist.
Right.
Those are the kinds of people who I want to talk to. Those are the kinds of people I want in the room. Those are the kinds of people I want writing curriculum. Yeah. Those are the kinds of people I want teaching teachers. Those are the kind of people I want presenting to parents. Those are the kinds of people I want talking to lawmakers about what education needs to look like in 2020, 2022, 2027. We can't, there's no more straight rows. There's no more textbooks. It's a waste of time, energy, and money.
Yeah. I think, have you ever seen the movie Food Inc.?
Is that
a great documentary? It has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I'm going to use an analogy he talks about. Okay. It's about food production in the United States.
Okay, I probably have, yeah.
And there's this organic farmer, and he goes, I've never seen a country try to get so efficient and great and make so much money from hitting the wrong target. Yeah. Nobody's questioned the target, right? And he was talking about food production and why we're giving corn to cows and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, everybody assumes that their goal, so like getting a 97 on the test, that target is our target. That is the best target. That is the best indicator of intelligence, the best indicator of what they're going to do with them. That's the target. And we have then built a whole education system around how to get a 97 on a test. But the target is garbage. Target.
You're talking about trying to reach perfection.
Well, but even if I talk about a test, the way a written test goes, who the hell cares? It's a bad target.
Yeah.
You know, to join the police force in Canada, in Toronto, you used to have to run a 6-minute mile. Yeah. That was one of the precursors, right? But all the guys joked. He's like, nobody gives a crap about this test after you passed it because it's just to keep the women out. It's a pretend objective test that makes it seem like it's a logical target, but nobody ever does it again, and it has nothing to do with job performance. Yeah. Yet, we got really good at running a 6-minute mile. Why? It's a stupid target. But it seems, and we're going to come back down to Florida, it seems objective, doesn't it? People love that word. People hold on to the word objectivity like a baby blanket.
Yeah. No.
That never existed. Yeah.
Usually means inequitable, in my opinion.
100%. And it never means objective.
Yeah.
Even if it's inequitably, even if it causes inequitable consequence, it is never objective because somebody has decided from their experience, from their research, from their bias, from their childhood, from their education in this university, what they should be doing, which is filled with subjectivity.
Yes.
It's mountains of subjective.
Yeah, great.
You know?
Great.
And that's fine. But let's stop using the word objective as though it exists. It doesn't exist. No. You know, and I hear guys like Jordan Peterson who make my ears bleed. I don't know if you listen to a lot of.
Oh, of course, yes. Okay. He loves lobster. He loves lobsters as much as I do.
This friggin' lobster, I can't. And I listen to him because I need to know when I stand so fundamentally opposed. When I hear people speak and everything he says, I go, it's not fair for me to hear the 15 seconds or 15 minutes. That's not good. So what do? I do deep dives. Heaven help me.
Read all his books.
Into his books. I didn't read the 12-step. I could care less of his 12 rules. If I never make a bet again, I'll be a happy camper. But I read and I watch a lot of his podcasts and I listen to the way he thinks and the way he argues, and I can tell I can now tell what he's going to say next.
You can predict, yeah.
I can absolutely predict. And he pretends as though this world of objectivity exists, and he's tried to distance himself so much from the social sciences as though pure sciences aren't subjective.
Yeah.
Right? And he's disavowed Marxism, feminism, any sort of identity politics, unless you're a man, and then if that identity politics should hold strong. But all of this is to deny subjectivity, to prove a fake objectivity through which we should run the world because it's so incredibly simplistic. And all the while, all he's doing, just like Ron DeSantis,
Promoting.
is he's playing on people's fake memories when they were 7 and they thought life was better. And it wasn't better. They were just ignorant because they were 7 and they had no idea of anything. So Florida, let's get to Florida and CRT.
And I love Florida. My parents have a home in Florida. I spent so much time in Florida. The people.
I go to Disney and Universal.
It's beautiful.
They're wrecking everything.
It's beautiful there, and it obviously has been around a long time. But again, it's a state that is crumbling, and I don't just mean like infrastructure. I mean, what is it truly standing on?
Mm-hmm.
And it's been happening for probably the last 12 years, right? 12, 3 sets of 4. And nobody's stepping forward. So they'll take anybody, anyone willing to do some work, and then they will support it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, we need volunteers, but oh God, please don't let that person they volunteered. Oh.
Right.
I'm sad because it could be an incredible state. It could be a leader in diversity education. It could be a leader in understanding second language learning. It could be a leader in outside education. It has so much going for it, but it's not embracing what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's a state with so much water. Like, imagine the work, the science, the outdoor education that could be, the beautiful people there. But instead they've chosen to try and get rid of. We'll just get rid of it. We'll get rid of it. We'll get rid of it. Instead of, wait, why don't we stop? It's deficit model. I spent a beautiful day yesterday with an amazing person named Aaron Jones, who wrote this incredible book called Bridges to Heal Us. And I said, the world continues to function from a deficit model instead of a strength-based approach. If I was Florida, I'd throw everything out and go, what do we have that's awesome here? Okay, let's use that to build everything.
Right.
But instead, they'd rather almost ignore their wonderful natural resources, the beautiful people there, the incredible diversity, the weather, the water. They would rather just say, no, we're just going to rip it all away. And I just thought Florida is an example of a deficit model.
I think Americans and some Canadians, look, I love where I live, but heaven help me. We have our own version, seemingly, of certain political ideologies. And I don't mean Republican or Democrat. I mean stupid person versus intelligent. And you can get stupid people all over sides of the aisle. But this notion that diversity is a failure, that diversity is a weakness, that diversity is somehow fracturing us, when the only thing that fractures us is when we don't build on how amazing that diversity is. If you talk about genetic diversity, nothing is stronger. Nothing is stronger than genetic diversity, and you have these individuals that will say, I'm only ever going to marry within my race, within my religion. And what you're doing outside of silly limitations is you're limiting your strength, your genetic strength. You know what I mean? I joke with my kids all the time. I go, you guys live here? Cool. You're going to find somebody to procreate with? Can you do it from, like, I don't know, Botswana?
Yeah.
Can you do it from, I don't know, Cambodia? Why? Yeah. Because the difference in genetics from those different places are going to have weaknesses over here and weaknesses over here. And we come together, you know what we do? We should do. We let go of the Mother Nature does it if we would just get the hell out of the way. We let go of our weakness, each of us, and when we procreate, we build something better. How does that same logic, unfortunately, I know the answer to this, and it's kind of rhetorical. How does that same logic not facilitate real diversity and equity programs within our schools, within government, within individual states, to bring awareness to everybody's different thought process. If you just shut the hell up, stop making them all write the same test, and you actually listen to what each person brought to the table, we all get better tomorrow. We
Fear
get
and
closer.
jealousy. Fear and jealousy. Fear and jealousy.
You think it is? You think it's fear and jealousy?
100%.
I think it's a quest for power.
We don't celebrate others enough. We're so egocentric. You and I could just throw names out of incredible scientific findings, none of which were Canadian and American.
Right.
Even though some incredible things have happened in Canada and America. But
Yeah.
there are some incredible things that have happened in China, in France, in Copenhagen, in places in Germany. Mm-hmm. And instead of celebrating that and embracing that and looking to that, we're like, darn it, I wish I had done that. Okay, I'm not going to tell anybody my ideas now because I want to win that.
Right.
I want the Nobel Prize for that. Number one is it's the sense of there's not enough celebration of difference in others and what they've accomplished. Don't even get me started on gender. You know what I mean? And then fear. Well, if I share my idea with somebody, they might take it and then they might get celebrated and I'm not. And that's going to really be upsetting. Mm-hmm. The best thing to do is to brainstorm because your idea might get someone else to spur something. And then let's celebrate that something's been fixed. Or created because of a small idea that you had. We're so egocentric because we have these houses we live in. We have these places that we can go and hide. I don't want to tell anybody. And we don't want to also let people know our weaknesses. If I sit in a room with a whole bunch of people that are different from me, they're going to find out I'm not as smart, talented, tall, maybe potentially capable as what I think I am.
Yeah.
Fear and jealousy.
Do you think one of those driving forces is capitalism?
Oh, of course.
Right?
Of course, because that's about money.
Things are leading to an economic bottom line.
It's about money. I'm not going to make as much money. I'm not going to get as much money. I'm not going to raise as much money. I'm going to have to spend more money.
Yeah.
100%.
Because I honestly believe that, and I've talked a lot about critical race theory. I honestly believe, sure, the United States has a race problem. There's no question about it. And do they really hate critical race theory for that? Absolutely. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to live it. They don't want to carry it, all of that. But I honestly believe at the basis of all that is still capitalism, because it does say, and it does show direct ties between, and you can't separate it. You can't separate slavery from an economic system. You can't.
It was an economic system.
You can't. You can't just say those two things go hand in hand. America is one of the greatest empires right to this day, an economic powerhouse, great. But for about 300 years, they had 2 million people working for free. There's reason for that, right? There's a reason that you were able to build what you built, and to deny that, it's so ridiculous. And as soon as you challenge it, it's like, oh, well, you're a communist. Oh, for the love of God. Can we not challenge something and say it's not good enough without saying it has to be that? Right? We live in such a, just like you said at the beginning, black and white, yes or no, either or. Those are the only two realities we live in. And I think that serves people trying to garner power, because they like to play on the fears and insecurities that you just brought up.
So
right?
What is wrong with the truth? This is where I go when I hear critical race theory conversations.
Yeah.
Why are we denying the truth? What is it about the truth that's driving these things? Because we know it's true.
Yeah. Well, they skew it. So whenever they want to talk about critical race theory, right? So they write legislation that says no white kid should ever feel guilty. For the love of God, it has nothing to do with the two. It hopes that nobody understands what critical race theory is. By the way, it's not being taught in elementary school anyway, but it hopes nobody understands it. And it hopes that I can fashion it in a way to make you feel like it's attacking you as a white family.
Your fault.
And then I'm going to come riding in on my horse and protect the traditional American family from what?
Again, though, it's fear. The truth hurts, but we have to talk about it. We have to address it. We have to read about it. We have to debate it. We have to discuss it so we don't perpetuate it, so that we've learned from it. We understand now it's terrible. It wasn't right. It destroyed families and generations of people. Okay, good. Now let's move forward with that knowledge. This is about understanding. And again, I go back to knowledge. What's wrong with gaining knowledge?
I think for a lot of people, and again, I keep going back to Florida because so much silliness is coming out of there. Texas is right up there as well. But this, the notion of the don't say gay bill, and I know people are always up in my comments. It never said don't say gay. I'm like, oh, for the love of God, just read it for 5 seconds. You understand the implications of the bill. But I think, and I'm hopeful. Here's where I'm hopeful. There's a reason that all these bills have happened in the last few years. And because there's been a huge push from the gay, look, in 20 years, there's been a huge push from the gay community. Lots more rights, lots more power, lots more acknowledgement, lots more representation, right? And now here comes the trans community. And the trans community is fighting, heaven help them, fighting their way through this din. And I think these laws are, and it's a painful process, but I honestly believe these laws are the last ditch effort of a dying breed.
Yes.
I think they're like the death thrall, where they make that big noise and there you think they're going to strike and then they just collapse because this is it. This is the only play they have anymore. They can't fight it. They can't argue around it. Education's not working for them because, now people, because I can't keep them in the classroom, and heaven help me, they go on the, online, they find out what gay's there, right? Oh my God, they can go look up CRT. Kids can go, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Because I read here, and I honestly believe that these are the death thralls of a dying, protective, and I hate the word traditional way of living.
Yeah.
It's going to be painful. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
And I feel the worst probably for the trans community right about now. But it's going to be painful for all involved. But I do see the pendulum that is swinging is because this is all they got. This is their
last ditch effort. Yeah, last ditch effort. Yeah, but so those who are allies, those who are supporters, those who are educators, those who are intelligent, what should we be doing during this time? Should we be laughing? Should we be staying the course? Should we be out there chanting? I think this is what's important for your followers to think about.
It's a great question. Yeah.
What should they be doing during these very difficult times that we know are wrong? Because fight or flight. People are either going to go back in their homes and hide and wait till it's over, or they're going to be out there fighting, and not necessarily are people equipped with the kind of knowledge and skills to be able to fight this properly.
I think that's the difference. This is what I would tell people. First of all, everybody has a different avenue. Everybody is going to have a different avenue, right? If you're a restaurant owner, or you're an electrician, or you're a teacher, or you're all going to have different avenues, right? So as individual as your world is, you stand up in your world.
Good.
Right? So for me, this platform, my TikTok, any platform I can get my hands on, any TED Talks that I can procure, any ability I have to travel to states like Florida, like Texas, like Missouri, I don't care, wherever, and sit down in a room full of people. And for me, I really like to target people who don't agree with me. I mean, that's just my nature. I want maybe not Ron, because I might smack him, but like the people that maybe aren't in their hearts bigoted, hateful people, but it just makes a lot of sense to them because no one's taken the time to explain something else. That's what I would do.
So you've seen that visual of the circle of control, circle of influence, out of your control, out of your influence. I'm really glad you said what you said, which is in your context,
But what can you do?
Do that in your
Right.
context.
If I own a restaurant, yeah, I put up signs in my restaurant. I make sure that trans kids and kids who are gay and African American families are celebrated. If I'm an electrician, I walk into a home saying, "This is what I'm about." I put it on my van. I put a big sticker on my van. Every single person can be a social advocate, and I'm not a big fan. Look, between you and the chanting and the picketing and the signs, I don't feel a lot of weight with that. I don't feel a lot of change with that. I do feel that change comes personally, and what I can do personally might be a little bit different. But if could you imagine if you had an electrician come in your home and on his shirt or her shirt they had a patch that says this company supports diversity, equity, and safety and community. Write it right there. Can you imagine? I would feel 10 times better with that person coming to my home. And that's that tiny thing. You walk into a family's home that maybe is a new immigrant family or a refugee family to this country, and you have to come fix their sink, and you have just that tiny little thing. You don't have to do anything else in your damn day. I think that in and of itself is power. I also think it's power. And this goes back to that the Holocaust poem. First they came for so and so, but I wasn't. I also think standing up when you hear garbage come out of people's mouths, you have to say something. We tell our kids that all the time. You can't be at an adult party and hear somebody say a racist joke and you keep your mouth shut. You are not. You're just as bad. You have to say
100%.
something, right?
100%. As you know, I love thrift store shopping.
Oh my God! All I did was in Kensington today.
Just love it. Went out yesterday morning or 2 days ago. There's lots of supportive places here in Spokane, Catholic Charities, the Gospel Mission, Value Village. I'm at the Gospel Mission. I'm buying planters because I have a big patio. They, of course, and there's a veterans one that I love too. And of course, they employ a variety of diverse people. And I always say, who's the manager? Thank you for employing diverse people or vets or whatever.
Can you imagine? Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Z. Can you imagine if everybody goes into a store and says that to a manager?
Yeah. Makes me so proud. Makes me so proud. Strength-based, right? We're not a deficit model here. We're strength-based. A guy is putting all the stuff on the shelves and he has a t-shirt on that says homeless. And it's got a big strike through it and it says human.
Right.
And I stared at that shirt and I thought, the simplicity of that message, especially there's an unbelievable amount of homelessness and poverty here in Spokane. It's a real have not sort of community. I just thought, where'd you get that shirt? I have to wear that. I want it. I'm going to give it to everybody I know. Because we don't see others as humans very often. We see them as whatever they are. But really, we see them as how we want to see them. It breaks my heart. As opposed to, no, everyone's a human.
Yeah.
And imagine if we had all kinds of things where we just put, whatever on there and stroke it out and go, no, human. Yeah. So it is about getting back to seeing everyone. I'm all about individualization, but and yesterday I ended my chat with Erin Jones saying, because I was asking her, how do I become a better ally? How do I call people out more on their racism? And I said, you know what? I'm not using love enough. I'm not coming at enough with love. And when I saw that shirt, I'm like, that is just all about love. Mm-hmm. We're not loving one another. We're not loving ourselves. We're not loving our situations. We're not loving our employers. We're not loving our families as much as we should. So how do we get back to that concept, which will then drive better decision making?
That's it.
That's where I'm at.
I like it. And I think that's
this week's thing I'm going to try and work on.
I think that's a powerful place to end. I think I always have a great we could sit here for hours. Let's be honest.
I know. I was just in Toronto. I feel really bad. I was in Aurelia.
That's close enough.
The Simcoe Muskoka Catholic District School Board. I did their principal and vice principal conferences. So I was between Aurelia, Toronto, and London in 9 days. It was crazy. And I'm like, The one thing I should have done was ensure that I got to see you. But I will see you. I will see you when I come back from Africa, I promise.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it so much. I'm going to put all of Dr. Z's stuff in the bio. So you're going to see where you can go hear her amazing stuff and go experience all of that sort of transformative learning and perspective that you bring to the table each day. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for spending Tuesday with me. I will see you next week. Same bat time, same bat station. Have a good day, guys. Bye, Dr. Z. Dismissed.